The forest beyond the old mill stood tall and dark. Its ancient trees loomed like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches twisted and turned, forming grotesque shapes against the silver moonlight. The night air hung heavy with a chilling mist that seeped through the undergrowth, whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. This forest had a reputation that spanned generations. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the forest that whispers. Tales of lost wanderers, ghostly figures, and eerie sounds filled the town folklore. Children shivered at bedtime stories, and adults avoided its shadowy paths. Yet the forest remained an enigma, drawing curious souls to its depths. Despite its ominous presence, the forest was beautiful in a haunting way. Silver beams of moonlight pierced through the dense canopy, creating a dance of light and shadow. The scent of pine mixed with decaying leaves, an earthy aroma that clung to the air. The sound of rustling leaves and distant, unidentifiable noises added to its mystique. It was a place where reality blurred with the supernatural. Many believed it was haunted, a realm where the living and the dead coexisted. The whispers were said to be the voices of those who had vanished, beckoning others to join them. And so the legend of the forest that whispers persisted, alive in the hearts and minds of the townspeople. Sarah was different from the rest of the townspeople. She had always been a pragmatic soul, relying on logic and reason. Superstitions and ghost stories held no power over her. To her, the forest was just a forest, a place of trees and animals, nothing more. The legends were mere stories, products of overactive imaginations. Sarah had recently moved to the town to work as a journalist. Her job was to uncover the truth, to dig deeper into the myths and bring facts to light. The town's obsession with the haunted forest intrigued her. She saw it as an opportunity to debunk the myths and present the truth to the world. Her skepticism grew stronger with each tale she heard. Her new colleagues warned her about the forest, sharing their own eerie experiences and encounters. They spoke of whispers and shadows, of feeling watched and followed. But Sarah remained unfazed. She believed there was a logical explanation for everything. Her determination to explore the forest and uncover its secrets only intensified. Her friends and colleagues tried to dissuade her. They begged her not to go, citing the countless people who had disappeared. But Sarah's mind was made up. She was going to enter the forest at night to prove once and for all that there was nothing supernatural about it. She prepared herself for the adventure, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The day of Sarah's adventure arrived. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the town. The townspeople went about their evening routines, but whispers of Sarah's plan spread quickly. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered prayers for her safety. The forest waited, as it had for centuries, patient and foreboding. Sarah packed her bag with essentials, a flashlight, a notebook, and her trusty camera. She dressed in sturdy clothes and laced up her boots. Her heart raced with a mix of excitement and adrenaline. This was it, her chance to uncover the truth. She left her house, the cool evening air brushing against her skin, and made her way to the old mill. As she approached the forest's edge, she paused for a moment. The trees stood like a wall of darkness, their branches reaching out as if to pull her in. She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the fear that threatened to creep in. She reminded herself that fear was irrational, that the forest was just trees and shadows. With one final glance back at the town, she stepped into the unknown. The forest swallowed her whole. The world outside ceased to exist, replaced by the dense, shadowy expanse. Sarah's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating a narrow path covered in fallen leaves. The air grew colder, and the sounds of the town faded into a distant memory. She pressed on, determined to find the source of the whispers and prove the legends wrong. The deeper she ventured, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The trees seemed to close in around her, their branches forming a claustrophobic canopy. The silence was deafening, broken only by the crunch of her footsteps. Sarah's skepticism wavered, but she pushed the doubt aside. She was here for a purpose, and she would see it through. Sarah's flashlight beam wavered in the thick darkness. Every step felt like a journey into another world. The forest floor was uneven, roots and rocks jutting out, threatening to trip her. She could hear her own breathing, loud and harsh in the silence. Her heart pounded in her chest. But she pressed on, refusing to let fear take hold. As she moved deeper, the forest seemed to come alive. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision, shapes that disappeared when she turned to look. The air grew colder, and a strange mist began to swirl around her feet. Her flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the trees. She shook it, trying to steady the beam, but it continued to flicker. The whispers began softly, barely audible over the rustling leaves. Sarah stopped, straining to hear. It sounded like voices, but distorted and distant, as if carried by the wind. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Urgent, pleading. A shiver ran down her spine, but she pushed the fear aside. She had come to investigate, and investigate she would. She continued on, the whispers growing louder with each step. They seemed to come from all around her, echoing through the trees. Her flashlight flickered more violently, and she cursed under her breath. The forest felt alive, watching her, waiting. Her skepticism was beginning to falter, but she pressed on. She had to know the truth. Section 5. The whispers begin. The whispers grew louder, surrounding Sarah like a chorus of ghostly voices. They called her name, soft and insistent, Sarah. The sound sent chills down her spine. She turned in circles, trying to pinpoint the source, but the voices seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Her heart raced, a mix of fear and curiosity propelling her forward. She stumbled over a root, catching herself just in time. Her flashlight flickered, then went out completely. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She fumbled with the flashlight, shaking it and hitting it against her palm, but it remained dark. The whispers continued, growing more urgent. "Sarah, come!" Desperation clawed at her. She pulled out her phone, using its dim light to guide her. The battery was low, and she knew it wouldn't last long. The forest seemed to close in around her, the trees pressing closer, the mist thickening. Fear gnawed at the edges of her mind, but she refused to give in. She had come to uncover the truth, and she would not be deterred. The whispers became clearer, each voice distinct. They spoke of lost souls, of secrets buried deep within the forest. Sarah's skepticism wavered, but she pushed the doubt aside. She had to find the source of the voices to prove that there was a logical explanation. She moved forward, the voices guiding her deeper into the heart of the forest. Section 6. Strange phenomena. Sarah's phone light flickered, casting eerie shadows. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Sarah, come closer." She moved cautiously, the forest seeming to shift around her. The trees twisted into grotesque shapes, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to grab her. The air grew colder, each breath forming a cloud of mist before her. She stumbled upon an old, abandoned campsite. The remnants of a fire pit lay in the center, surrounded by tattered tents and rusted camping gear. It looked as if it had been untouched for years, yet there were no signs of decay. The sight sent a chill down her spine. She felt as if she had stepped into a different time, a place where the past and present converged. As she explored the campsite, the whispers grew louder, more demanding. "Sarah, join us." She found an old journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. She flipped through it, the entries filled with descriptions of strange occurrences and eerie sounds. The last entry was a hurried scrawl, describing whispers and shadows, ending abruptly. The writer had disappeared, just like the others. Fear tightened its grip on Sarah, but she pushed on. She had to find the truth. As she moved away from the campsite, the forest seemed to come alive. The trees rustled and shadows moved at the edge of her vision. Her phone light flickered again, and the whispers became a cacophony. "Sarah, we are waiting." She felt a presence behind her, and she turned, but there was nothing there. She quickened her pace, the sense of being watched growing stronger with each step. Section 7. The height of fear. Sarah's heart pounded as she moved deeper into the forest. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. "Sarah, you cannot escape." The air was thick, oppressive. Her phone light flickered and died, plunging her into darkness. Panic surged through her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had to keep moving, had to find a way out. She felt the presence again, closer this time. She turned, her eyes straining to see in the darkness. Shadows moved, shapes shifting in the mist. She could hear footsteps behind her, matching her own. Fear gnawed at her, but she refused to give in. She broke into a run, the whispers and footsteps following her. The forest seemed to close in, the trees forming a maze. Her breathing was ragged, her heart racing. She stumbled over roots and rocks, her hands scraping against rough bark. The whispers were deafening, a cacophony of voices calling her name. "Sarah, join us!" She felt a cold hand brush against her arm, and she screamed, but no sound came out. She ran faster, her mind a blur of fear and desperation. The forest seemed endless, each turn leading deeper into darkness. Her legs burned, her lungs ached, but she couldn't stop. The whispers were inside her head, filling her mind with their demands. "Sarah, you belong to us!" She stumbled again, falling to her knees. The presence was all around her, closing in. She could feel their cold breath on her neck, their fingers reaching for her. She scrambled to her feet, fighting to stay ahead of the terror that pursued her. Section 8. The terrifying encounter. Sarah's strength was waning. The whispers were relentless, echoing in her mind. Sarah, surrender. She felt the cold presence closing in, a weight pressing on her chest. Her vision blurred, and she stumbled, falling to the ground. She lay there, gasping for breath, the forest spinning around her. The shadows loomed, their forms shifting and changing. She forced herself to stand, her legs trembling. The presence was closer now, almost tangible. She could feel their cold fingers brushing against her skin, hear their whispers in her ear. "Sarah, you cannot escape!" She turned, her eyes widening in terror. The shadows took shape, forming grotesque figures that reached out for her. She backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. The figures moved closer, their whispers a deafening roar. "Sarah, join us!" She felt a hand grasp her arm and she screamed, jerking away. The forest seemed to close in, the trees forming a cage around her. She ran, her mind a blur of fear and desperation. The figures followed, their whispers growing louder, more insistent. She could feel their breath on her neck, their fingers brushing against her skin. She stumbled again, falling to the ground. The figures were upon her, their cold hands gripping her arms, their whispers filling her mind. "Sarah, you belong to us." She struggled, but their grip was too strong. She felt the cold seep into her bones, the darkness closing in. Her vision blurred, and she felt herself being pulled into the shadows. The last thing she heard was the sound of her own name, whispered by 1,000 voices. In Section 9, the chase. Sarah's vision cleared, and she found herself in a different part of the forest. The shadows had released her, but their presence lingered. The whispers were quieter now, more distant. "Sarah, run!" She didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding, and took off running. The forest seemed to shift around her, the trees forming a maze. She ran blindly, her mind a blur of fear and confusion. The shadows followed, their whispers growing louder. "Sarah, you cannot escape!" She turned, dodging trees and leaping over roots. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her legs burning with the effort. The forest seemed endless, each turn leading deeper into darkness. She could hear the shadows behind her, their footsteps matching her own. Her strength was waning, her vision blurring. She stumbled, falling to her knees. The whispers were deafening, a cacophony of voices calling her name. "Sarah, surrender!" She forced herself to stand, her legs trembling. The shadows were closer now, almost tangible. She could feel their cold breath on her neck, their fingers brushing against her skin. She ran, her mind a blur of fear and desperation. The forest seemed to close in, the trees forming a cage around her. She could hear the shadows behind her, their footsteps matching her own. Her legs burned, her lungs ached, but she couldn't stop. The whispers were inside her head, filling her mind with their demands. "Sarah, you belong to us." She stumbled again, falling to the ground. The presence was all around her, closing in. She could feel their cold breath on her neck, their fingers reaching for her. Section 10. Sarah's disappearance. Sarah's strength was gone. She lay on the forest floor, gasping for breath. The whispers surrounded her, a deafening roar. "Sarah, join us!" She felt the cold presence closing in, a weight pressing on her chest. Her vision blurred, and she struggled to stay conscious. The shadows loomed, their forms shifting and changing. She could feel their cold fingers brushing against her skin, hear their whispers in her ear. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. The shadows moved closer, their whispers a cacophony of voices. "Sarah, you cannot escape." She felt a hand grasp her arm, and she screamed, but no sound came out. The forest seemed to close in, the trees forming a cage around her. She could feel their breath on her neck, their fingers brushing against her skin. She struggled to break free, but their grip was too strong. Her vision darkened, and she felt herself being pulled into the shadows. The forest seemed to blur around her, the trees and mist becoming indistinct shapes. The whispers grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. "Sarah, surrender." She felt the cold seep into her bones, the darkness closing in. Her mind was a blur of fear and despair. She reached out, trying to find something to hold on to. There was nothing. The last thing she saw was the forest, dark and foreboding, closing in around her. The last thing she heard was the sound of her own name, whispered by 1,000 voices. "Sarah, you belong to us." And then there was nothing. The forest was silent once more, the whispers fading into the night. Sarah was gone, lost to the shadows. The legend of the forest that whispers had claimed another soul. Section 11. The legend lives on. The town was abuzz with whispers. Sarah had disappeared, just like the others. Her friends and colleagues searched for her, but there was no trace. The forest remained silent, its secrets hidden within its depths. The legend of the forest that whispers grew stronger, the townspeople speaking in hushed tones about the latest victim. Sarah's disappearance became a part of the town's folklore. Children whispered her name in the darkness, daring each other to venture into the forest. The adults spoke of her bravery, her determination to uncover the truth, but they also spoke of the forest's power, its ability to claim those who ventured too far. The whispers continued, calling out to those who dared to listen. The forest remained an enigma, a place where reality and legend converged. The whispers were a reminder of its power, a warning to those who might think to enter. Some said the forest was haunted, that the spirits of the lost wandered its depths. Others believed it was a portal, a gateway to another world, but all agreed on one thing: the forest was not to be trifled with, and so the legend of the forest, that whispers, lived on. The townspeople continued to share their stories, their warnings. The whispers were a part of the town's identity, a reminder of the unknown that lay just beyond their doorstep. Sarah's fate remained a mystery, her story a cautionary tale. The forest waited, patient and foreboding, ready to claim its next victim.